Welcome to another episode of Data Analytics Chat. I'm Ben Parker, data recruiter and podcast host, looking to share knowledge and insights to the industry. Today, I'm excited to welcome Robin Sutara, Field Chief Data Strategy Officer at Databricks. Robin has had a unique career, starting in the US Army, which paved the way for an incredible career at Microsoft, where she climbed the ladder to become the Chief Data Officer. Robin is committed to promoting diversity and inclusion within the industry. She has been recognised as one of the top 20 women in data and tech and featured in the Data IQ 100 most influential people in data. We're pleased to have Robin join us today to share her insights and experience in this ever evolving world. In today's episode, we'll explore her career journey, how she got started, pivotal moments that shaped her path, and also the transition into leadership. Robin, welcome to the podcast.
Ben, thank you so much for having me. Really looking forward to today's conversation.
Yeah, likewise. I'm looking forward to it. So, do you want to start off with, sharing your journey? I guess, like I mentioned, you've had a different career path, so it'd be good also to get an understanding of what inspired you in the field.
Yeah, I think I am probably one of the most eclectic people. I think if you think about a career in data and AI, I was not a traditional STEM undergraduate going into the field. As you mentioned, my career path actually started in the U.S. Army, where I did the weapons and electrical systems for the Apache helicopter. So, stationed in Korea on the DMZ, just a phenomenal opportunity to leverage at the time what was sort of the latest and greatest in technical capabilities and achievements. The interesting part, I think, and why I originally started gravitating toward the technical field as a result is while stationed in Fort Campbell, Kentucky, Microsoft came out with this new product called Microsoft Excel. It wasn't quite the Office suite yet. They were still selling it product by product. But essentially, we were looking at that as part of our capabilities there at Fort Campbell to determine how could we leverage something like Excel to start to create a database of things like parts, of things like maintenance records and services against the aircraft, et cetera. And so for me, it was really just a fascinating space of the computer. Prior to that, at least my interactions with it had very much been on the consumer side, playing solitaire, et cetera. And so for me, that was the first eye-opening experience of this computer, and technology and capabilities was really going to change, I think, the enterprise and how we could deliver services and do things like be able to deliver insights to organizations to help allocate resources and control supply chain and all of those facets. So I told my platoon leader that I was going to go work at Microsoft when I got out of the Army. And of course, I'm a 20-year-old kid. And so he really thought that was amusing because I had no undergraduate degree and I was really just sort of focused on I'm going to go work at Microsoft. And so when I get out of the Army, I really was my entire objective was how do I get to Microsoft? And so what I did was, as you look to do that transition, very few people have Apache helicopters, right, sitting in their yards looking for weapon systems to be repaired on them. And so I needed to figure out what was my transitionary period. I ended up going into computer hardware repair and getting hired by a fabulous vet who was willing to give me the opportunity. But what I did was pursue the Microsoft Certified Systems Engineer at night. So essentially, I would work during the day and then study for those exams in the evening. And I think you'll see that's a sort of a career path that I followed often. Like when I wanted to figure out what was my next career step, I often turned to education, certification, et cetera. And so very fortunate to have done that certification and connect with and network with some people who got the opportunity to go interview at Microsoft. They were hiring people to come in and support live on Windows 3.1. And so I got called into an interview because I knew somebody else that had been gotten a job offer. So I went into the interview on a Friday afternoon, got the offer to start on Monday. And then, yeah, fabulous 23-year career, as you mentioned, at Microsoft after that. Started in the consumer side, went into more of a technical account manager role, focused on automotive customers for about 10 years doing that. Again, hit a pivotal point in my career on sort of what's next. I had hit sort of the ceiling of that career path. So in typical fashion, I went back to school and actually ended up going to law school because at the time Microsoft was filing a significant number of patents, had a lot of intellectual property protection that they were looking to do. So I would work Monday through Friday. I went to law school on Saturday and Sunday, did that for 3 years, and ultimately graduated with my master's of law, my Juris Doctorate, and my master's of law in intellectual property, thinking that I would be a lawyer at Microsoft. Went into legal and had the conversation about doing that transition from technical into legal. And they thought it was fabulous that I had the degree, but they essentially said, you'll have to leave Microsoft practice and come back. And so I started to think about what were other roles, that I could take all these skills and capabilities and competencies that I learned at law school and apply inside the company so that I wouldn't have to leave, because I was sort of a single mom with 2 kids at the time and not able to do that. And so that's when I landed my first real data role at Microsoft. I had the opportunity to work with a fabulous team of data analysts who are looking at internal and external data sources to be able to aggregate them in a way that was telling the customer story that we could present to internal teams, operations, et cetera, to change internally how Microsoft was operating as a business. And so super fascinating opportunity to really see how we could pull data together in a way that told a story to drive the business differently, and all of the change management and operations and processes and culture that had to go behind that. And so I was in that team for several years. It was a very different team, right? When Steve Ballmer was CEO, when Satya Nadella came in as CEO, I think that was really a transformational point for me to think about what was the real power of data and how could you transform an entire, organization that essentially had this legacy around process and operations, and being able to really make a difference by being data led and data driven, and what was the impact that that could have. And I think it's a phenomenal success story there. I wanted to stay in data, but I was sort of looking for my next opportunity, and was super fortunate in that because Microsoft is so broad, to look for the next thing that I could do. And I realized I worked at a software company, but I didn't understand how we made software. And so I went on and took on a chief operating officer role with Azure Data Engineering. So it was a great opportunity to work with some phenomenal leaders creating products across 27 different product lines, everything from SQL Server on-prem all the way up through all of the database platforms that we had, through ingestion up to the warehouse, and then essentially Purview and the governance layer sitting on top of it. So again, really, really good opportunity for me to learn how do I help engineers and actual people building Microsoft products. How could I help them operationalize? So create frameworks and standards and change management, and help them on that journey of growth and opportunity. Then based on that work, as you mentioned, I got the call from the Microsoft UK team, to essentially come over and help them create, for the first time anywhere in the world, in a subsidiary, chief data officer role right there within Microsoft UK. So it was an amazing opportunity to, again, focus partially internally on helping the teams think about data and AI and how we were going to execute against that and leverage it for our own business, but also then to get connected with customers and figure out how are they using Microsoft products to be able to do that. Now today, I work for Databricks. I've been with them for about 2.5 years in a very similar role that's helping our customers. Databricks is a phenomenal platform that originated out of AI, creators of Spark and creators of the Lakehouse, now working on the data intelligence platform to really help our customers figure out how do you bridge the gap between your structured data in your warehouse, your unstructured data in the lake, and really be able to drive data and AI solutions for organizations, more than 12,000 customers globally. And I feel like I travel to almost all of them, it feels like, at this point, to help them figure out, how do they leverage that great technology, but how do they also bring their people, their processes, their change management, their cultures along on the journey. So yeah, that's a long sort of career path, but I think, I've spent the last 15 years in data specifically, and it's just been a phenomenal journey, pace of innovation that I'm sure you see as well.
No, amazing. And obviously a different journey what's good, I think now there's so many different options, isn't there, into data. I guess for your point of view, how did your learning into data sort of unfold? Because obviously you've come from a completely different area.
Yeah, I think for me, it really was that first job with the data analyst, because again, I had done law school. I wasn't going to leave Microsoft to go practice law somewhere. And so for me, it was looking at what were the skills and competencies that I learned in law school, and having been at Microsoft already then by 10 years, what were those skills and competencies that I thought could translate into this data analytics manager, team manager. And for me, it was a few things, right? If you think about data storytelling, it is very much trying to convince business leaders, executives, CEOs, et cetera, on how to translate the data and what is the impact that it can have on the business. And so for me, I've said, hey, that's no different than if I'm a lawyer and I'm making an argument in front of a judge, right? It's very similar, sort of, how do you create the story in a way that's supported by data or facts or law, et cetera, and put it together in a way that you're impacting and influencing business leaders to sort of change the way that they currently run the business, because you're essentially, taking data to say, your current process could be optimized, your people could be more efficient, you could, deliver this better product or service to our customers if we look at the data, and this is how we would translate it. And so for me, it really was my landing in data was figuring out, how do I take my superpowers and my strengths and my competencies that I had learned in project management and growing and developing customers, and the technical expertise and knowledge, as well as sort of the capabilities I learned in law school, and translate that into a data role. And so I think for lots of people, if you come up via that non-traditional path, there's lots of opportunities for you to look at the things you have done, the education that you have, certifications that you've earned, and how do you translate that into the value proposition that data roles offer organizations.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, especially now, data's getting even more defined, isn't it? Like if you know data in sales, data in like any department now, you can become more specialised, and it's just data is going that way. And I think I love what you've done is sort of done a bit of self reflection on yourself, like what am I actually good at? Because a lot of people nowadays, obviously, they hear the buzz data AI. You might not be like passionate about it or have the relevant skills. I mean, everyone's got different qualities, and you need to choose where, obviously, what you're good at, because that's where you're going to excel and get the most enjoyment out of life, aren't you? Really?
Exactly. And I think you're right. That just the pace of innovation, if you think about it, as fast as tech is moving, you have to be willing to constantly learn, right? And learn that new technology. And maybe that does mean, a new certification, a new, right, a new course you might take, whether it's formally via school, like I've done in the past, but there's also informal sort of opportunities on the job training, et cetera. And then how do you tie the gap with that technical knowledge and thinking about what are the strengths and skills and competencies, capabilities that you bring? Because again, if you're going to create diverse teams, we need to have people with different backgrounds, different educations, different socioeconomic, different cultures, et cetera. And they're all going to bring their superpower into that data translation and that data story and that data execution. So I really think that even if you're not super passionate about hands-on keyboard, coding, there's still so much opportunity in the data and AI space to take your value and your brand and be able to translate that into data roles.
Yeah. I mean, that's one thing when I was. So I tried to study coding or do my first degree was computer science, but I just couldn't do programming. I just couldn't get my head around it, and I just weren't like I wasn't knowledgeable about the different areas in tech, like obviously like service delivery, all the like non-technical areas, like non-coding areas. I think like maybe it should be obviously I mean, especially with AI now, it's so big as well. I think more education needs to be done, I guess, early years, because you're just sort of thrown in at the deep end. Obviously, you don't really know what you want to do in your career, and you need to start getting learning early to expand your knowledge and to just forge out your path. Because a lot of people just end up in a job and then they go for it. But I think if you get more knowledge and then again apply your super skills, you're going to be more better suited and more better directed into choosing the relevant career path earlier on.
Exactly. And I mean, the nice part is it is changing so fast. So even if you land in a role and you're like, I'm not quite sure that this is the right fit, take advantage of it, right? Learn what you can, because it'll help make you stronger for that next role, and it'll help you be more clear on, what are your superpowers? What are the things that get you up in the morning to go to work every day? I mean, for me, I travel a lot, which I thought I would like. I'm not sure I like it quite as much as I do it. But what I do love is meeting with customers and really learning about super hard data problems that they're using our platform to solve for. And so when you think of things like delivering better diabetic patient treatment via AI, right, and sort of automating some of that capabilities of the actual machines to inject the right amount of insulin to help them live better lives, things like that are just phenomenally impactful, and that technology can help them do that today. And so, right, for me, it's that customer connection. It's, seeing what they're leveraging our platform to be able to solve, and trying to figure out how do I help them deliver, better products and services for their customers, and how do I help them do that in a cost effective way in today's world of economic uncertainty. We have to make sure that we're being fiscally responsible. We're not impacting huge carbon footprints, et cetera, et cetera. And so I feel like for every customer I talk to, there's something that I care about, whether it's for me or the next generation, et cetera. And so I think most people can find that, and you can find that in data roles, and just figure out what is the part that really makes you excited and happy and energetic to come to work. And I think if you ground your superpower into that delivery, you're set up for success.
Yeah, I think definitely, like, you need to be aware of what you want, because obviously a lot of people, if you're unhappy in where are you in life, like, first thing is obviously change your job. But like, if you don't, obviously, look, it'd be good if you, like, for the first 3 to 6 months, it'd be great because it's a new environment you're learning. But then if you don't identify the challenges or what's ticking you to sort of get out of bed, your passion, the same problems will just reborn again. You need to just actually find out what you want to achieve, and then I guess focus on it. Like, and obviously, life's ups and downs, isn't it? If you keep focusing on the negative stuff, of course you're just going to focus on negative. But like I said, if you're making impactful stuff for clients, if you focus on that, it's obviously going to bring more positivity about your life.
Exactly.
And then also, obviously, you've done a lot of work within sort of the, like, women in data and AI communities. What sort of made you get involved there?
Yeah, I think for me, right, I mean, now 30 years into my career, I sort of look back at every time I went into a role where I was the only female gender representation in the room, or I was the only, right, I was the only one who didn't graduate from the University of Wisconsin, right, whatever school. I think for me, it became very, very obvious that in many, many of these technical fields, we tend to hire the people that are very similar to us. And so if I started to look across the ecosystem, and particularly now, if you think about things like, what organizations are now starting to do with AI, but the AI is built on sort of biased data sets. And so if you think about the power of having a team that's going to point out where the things that you don't see because your limited experience isn't the same as someone's. And so if we think of the power of the technology, what you really need is enough of a diverse team that's going to be able to help see around those corners that we might be blind to based on our own unconscious biases. So if I think about my career as a leader, it always has been about how do I hire a team, that some of them have similar skill sets and strengths to mine, but some of them are the opposite and have strengths and competencies and capabilities that aren't my superpower, so that we have a nice balanced organization to be able to think about those things. So when I started to look across the ecosystem, I realized there really was a fairly large gender disparity that existed in many, many of the technical and data roles that I was either in and or the teams I was growing. And so I gravitated toward the women in data community out of the UK. So womenindata.co.uk is a great site to check out if you're interested in looking at the community. But what I really appreciated specifically about them was they were focused on getting gender equity into data and AI roles at every level of the career. So for someone like me who was a non-traditional entrance into the data space, this community was really fostering on how do we get net new talent into data, and it can be traditional STEM paths, and how do we create community for them, but how do we also think about career pivoters, people that have been in one career or one field and are now looking to take that domain area of expertise into data. It focused on earlier in career, how do we help them get certified, how do we help them keep on top of technology. I mean, Databricks platform continues to evolve, and if I think about how do I make sure that there's a way for us to feed into communities like Women in Data to help people stay on top of the certifications, to learn the new capabilities of the product and the platform so that they are prepared to continue to grow in their career and their capabilities. It also focuses on women that are sort of mid-career and, trying to figure out the balance between family and home and parents and children and pets and all of those things that you have to take care of on top of continuing your career and your growth and the networking and community that you need there, up to senior women in their career and the different needs that they have, to have an open community of other leaders that they can talk to about issues, problems, concerns, plans, strategy, etc. For me, I gravitated specifically toward that community because of how do we solve for the equity issues that exist in gender parity, but also how do we support women at every stage of their career journey from entry to the most senior levels. And so for me, if I think about where I want to volunteer my time, it's in a community like that's really sort of focused on not just this generation, but also the next.
Yeah, because I mean, even when I studied computer science, like the 2 semesters I did, I think it was quite heavily male driven. How did you overcome that then? Because that must have been challenges for you early in your career. Um, how did you overcome them challenges then?
I think for me, I've always been like super competitive, right? I mean, in my spare time, I do triathlons because I'm competitive with myself, right? I'm
Uh,
data driven and competitive, so triathlons
but
are
you want
very.
to win.
I right. I never know. I never think that I will be a professional athlete, but what I can say is, did I do better on my bike split? Did I do negative splits on my marathon, etc.?
Yeah,
And so for me, it is very much about competition and competing with myself to be the best that I can. And can I improve and get better? So when I was in those scenarios where I was the one female in a computer science class, or I was the one female sitting around the table, right, of all male engineers, for me, it very much is like, am I doing the best thing that I can? And am I driving the impact that I know I can have? But there were a few, I mean, I would be lying if I said I never had imposter syndrome or I never sat at that table and sort of said, oh my gosh, right, it's really daunting. These people are very intelligent. They're brilliant minds. What am I doing at the table? But I once had a female leader, I think that really gave me a message that resonated, which was, not only take a seat at the table when you walk in the room, meaning don't sit around the outside edges, but once you have the seat on the table, know that your unique superpower and your value gives you a right to have a voice at the table. And so for me, I really think about how do I make sure that I'm sitting at the table, that I have a chair at the table, and that I'm bringing my unique value proposition. So I sort of tell my leaders now, I will never be the person that just says yes and agrees with everyone else around the table. So if I'm not speaking, it's not that I don't have anything important to say, but what I don't have is something different to say. So when I do speak, it'll be something important, relevant that we'll need to discuss and decide.
yeah. No, I think lots. Of speaking to many leaders over the years, like, communication skills is important. And also, like listening. Just listening is so important. I think nowadays you don't necessarily have to have your voice heard. But listening and hearing people's thoughts is key because then you can adjust your answer. And like I said, if you don't agree, then you can step in and say, actually, have we tried this approach just to make it a bit more, I guess, easier and easier to communicate.
Well, and if you think about the biases in the system, you need people who are going to sort of step in to say, if we look at it from this other point of view, is there something else we should consider? Whether it's in a product that you're developing or delivering, whether it's in how you're executing against your customers, if it's how a process that you're driving internally. I think that's what's so important, and that's why you create diverse teams in the first place. Is you want people to voice concerns, issues, another point of view to make sure that we're thinking holistically end to end.
Yeah, definitely. So, what were the key moments that shaped your career? Would you say, looking back?
Yeah, I don't know. I think I think is a good question. I don't know that there was any singular key moment for me. I think there were lots of defining moments that pivoted my career. and sort of some of them in my personal life, some of them in my professional life. But there, there were always sort of points where you stay in a job, and like you mentioned, have you lost the enjoyment? Has it become fairly mundane? For me, I always want a challenge, right? I want something that's going to push me a little outside, or a lot sometimes outside of my comfort zone. But I also want something that I know that I can help deliver, I can help influence, I can help an organization grow and scale and be able to deliver the best products and services to customers. And so for me, I think those pivotal moments were always sort of a point for me that happened when I had either hit status quo and I felt like I wasn't being challenged enough anymore, or there was a pretty significant, sort of event or period or time where a triggering event sort of said, okay, now I know I've hit my threshold or my capability or my competency, and I need to make a change. But if I look back at my career, I think people always ask me, like, how did you work your way up the ladder? And I don't know that I didn't have a direct path up. I feel like it was very much a squiggly career. That's a great book if you haven't read it, by the way, Squiggly Careers, because I think lots of people think about, at what point do you take maybe a sidestep to learn a new capability or a new part of the business, which I did often at Microsoft, right? It was all of those job changes were not necessarily up leveling or a promotion, but what they were side steps or even maybe one rung below to say, I'm going to do this because I know that the skills or capabilities or impact are going to be something that's meaningful for me. And so I think those defining moments become, when do you think you've hit that threshold and you need to make sort of that change? And then what are your criteria for making those decisions on what that will be? And maybe it is a step up in a promotion, but maybe it is also a side step to learn a new capability, or it's a step backward to take on, a new organization, a new part of the business, et cetera. And all of that, I think, still makes you stronger, even if it's not linearly directly up above from where you are today.
Yeah, like I said, I think the more capabilities you understand, especially when you get to your level, like sea level, you need to be more rounded anyway. So I think it all adds to your expertise and knowledge, basically. Um, so then, do you think, being obviously just going back to your sporting accolades, do you think that's one thing that's sort of kept you grounded, like to keep improving, is the competitive nature in yourself?
I think so. And I think the other thing is having a strong ecosystem around me. I think, right,
Hmm.
I've been super fortunate to work with some phenomenal people throughout the course of my career, to meet some through the communities that I've participated in. Right. So if I think the things that keep me grounded, it's that self competition, but it's also thinking through, how do I make sure that I'm bridging the gap between that networking and community and effort that you're putting into those things, and building sort of the ecosystem that I need. So if I think about it, there's sort of three roles for me. One is like a mentor, right? Who are the people that I want to learn a skill or competency for, that I want to connect, probably for a limited transactional period of time, where there will be some level of knowledge sharing that I can either gain or give from that relationship. So whether I'm the mentor or mentee, I very much view those as temporary sort of relationships that I will have with people across my network. I have what I call more my board of directors, or my cheerleaders. Those are the ones that I sort of keep throughout the course of my career. And as I'm thinking about, what would my next opportunity be, particularly, for example, when I was leaving Microsoft to come to Databricks, right? Having been at one company for more than 20 years and making a shift outside of that company, it's a little bit of a daunting decision. And so I definitely leaned heavily on my board of directors to talk through the pros, the cons, right? The strengths that I was going to bring, the gaps in my capabilities and competencies that I was going to have to work on. Sometimes they can be my cheerleaders and say, absolutely, you can do that. And some other times they're my voice of reason to say, have you thought about this other, right? I know you, I've worked with you, I've known you for a long time. Have you thought about these other things that might be a con that you haven't thought about? And so I really appreciate having that sort of board of directors role in my life. And then, the other is sponsors. I think the higher you want to go in your career, you really have to have somebody that's in the room when you aren't, that is familiar with your work, your capabilities, your competencies, your aspirations. And they're the ones who, behind closed doors in those senior conversations, can represent you and or sort of put you forward when new opportunities become available. And I think being really, really specific and explicit on each of those roles, on who they are in your life, and making sure that you're being clear with those people that you built those connections with on what you're asking, what function you're asking them to fulfill. So I think for me, those are sort of three requirements as I look back at the course of my career. So some of it's self-driven, but I think you absolutely need your network, your community, et cetera, to support as you continue to evolve.
Yeah, I like that. And I think again, there's obviously making them connections as well, asking for help, isn't it? Really, like I think some people try and do it all themselves when, like, just if you go to someone that's been there, done it, it's going to add so much value to yourself. And look, you're mentoring people now. Everyone wants to help people, don't they? And progress. So I think
Yeah,
people shouldn't be scared, like, to ask for help because people do want to help, and obviously it's karma, isn't it? In my opinion, you'll provide help in other ways.
exactly. And I think if we think about it, I think you're absolutely right. There are lots of times where people will reach out to me on LinkedIn and say, "Hey, do you mind having a single, right, a career conversation or right, being a mentor for this capability or this competency?" Like I always try to make time to do those things because I do think it does nothing but help build each other up if we take the time to do that. So don't be afraid if you see somebody and you think, oh, I would really love to learn more about that part of their career or how they've done that. And for most people, they do want to volunteer their time. They are perfectly happy to have those types of conversations, but you just need to ask. I think early in my career, I was always worried to make that ask because I always sort of thought, what value do I have to bring to them, right? What value are they going to get out of the conversation? And for me, I needed to mentally sort of define that before I would ever ask somebody to mentor me. And what I realized is they don't expect anything in return, right? And so, as long as I was very specific on what I admired, what I wanted to learn from them, what I was hoping to achieve, so many of those leaders were super gracious in giving me their time and experience. I'll give you an example. There was a CVP at Microsoft, I thought, who was just amazing at demonstrating empathy, right? I observed her multiple times in small group settings and large group settings, and she just had this natural ability to connect with people. And I was an early manager, and I was getting feedback from my team that I was very robotic, and that I didn't seem human at work. I was just very driven to get work done. And so I just went to her and said, I really admire my observations and you being able to make this human connection and demonstrate empathy fairly quickly in these varying size of audiences. And I would love to just chat with you on what are some of the tactics that you use to do that, because it's a skill and competency that I want to grow and develop so that I can continue to be a better leader in the future. She was super gracious, gave me a few hours of her time over several months, and I learned a lot from her on sort of how to do that. So don't be afraid if you see somebody in your network on LinkedIn and speaking at an event, et cetera, that demonstrates a skill or a competency that you want to learn more about. Many of them would be more than gracious to give you some time.
Yeah, I guess you can also, it don't necessarily have to be within data, does it? Because leadership is completely soft skill, isn't it? Like to put that empathy, people management. You can branch out to different industries if you've got like maybe friends that have progressed up, or you've got someone in your network.
Exactly.
I guess like, again, it goes back. It's just adding that your knowledge and insights, and it's going to benefit your career.
Absolutely. And I don't even think it has to be your friends or somebody you know, right? Like it really can be, right? We all go to these big data conferences. We all do these sort of events, that have lots of people. It could be something through, your old university group. It could be something that you've attended professionally, et cetera. I think there's so much opportunity, right, to figure out how do you make that connection and continue to build community. And there's lots of opportunities to do.
You don't ask, you don't get.
Exactly.
So, with your career, what's been the biggest challenge in your career, and I guess how did you overcome it?
Yeah, I think I referred to it a little earlier. I think my biggest challenge in my career has always been myself, right? Like, I think I'm very good at sometimes, being my own worst critic on, am I the right fit for that role? I don't have the job description has 10 requirements and I don't have this one. Should I apply, etc. So for me, I think, if I look at the first half of my career where I stayed very much in a single role, got some levels of promotion and maybe a slightly larger scope. I don't think personally my career really took off until I was willing to take some of those risks and stop being the person to talk myself out of, pursuing those incremental opportunities or pursuing those stretch opportunities. And once I started getting out of my own way, I think I think I've done much, much better. I sort of, learning so much more and having so much more impact. And so for me, it really was stop being my own harshest critic and just sort of take the leap of faith.
Yeah, no, I like that. And I mean, I think just like I said, just go for it because what's it in the you're going to get a no or you've learned from it. End of the day, isn't it? It's all about growing and just it's always in your brain is going to give you your mindset's going to give you doubt. But I think sometimes that's the biggest learning curve, isn't it? I think when you push through the challenges.
Yeah, and I love your like say you're right. Sometimes you will get the no, and then how do you use that as a learning opportunity? Like try to understand why the no, right? What are the things or the skills or the capabilities or what did you not articulate well enough so that you learn for the next opportunity?
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So now, obviously, now data and AI is rapidly evolving. How are you keeping relevant with the rapid changes?
Yeah, I think that is definitely something that everybody is struggling with right now is just sort of that
Yes.
that pace of innovation, the pace and volume of information, how fast it's changing. I think for me, there's a couple of things. I mean, I work at a phenomenally brilliant company, right? And so I have some amazing people here that are experts in these fields. And so for me, I try to leverage things that they work on, like blog posts, ebooks, et cetera, that they're putting together, podcasts, et cetera, that they are putting together. How much of that, those things, can I absorb and learn from? I tend to not just be a reader to learn, and so I have to get like hands on inside the product, or I need to, observe demos or watch videos of people actually inside and sort of building those things out. And so how do I make sure that I'm developing a plan that works for me, right? Because everybody learn slightly differently. And so I think, learning what those methodologies are and then trying to find the ways that you can connect into the community. There's great things on LinkedIn, podcasts, et cetera, things, things like your podcast, Ben. I think there's lots and lots of ways that people can learn. And so it really is figuring out what are those things that work for you. And then where do you fit in the time? I think it is probably the biggest problem I have in that, the work day. It tends to last relatively long. And as I mentioned, I travel quite extensively. Where can I do things like download podcasts to listen to on an airplane? Or where can I potentially listen to something? I don't actually listen to things while I exercise. People always ask me that question. I mean, if I'm going for a 90-minute run, on a Sunday, I try not to listen to anything, actually. I don't listen to music. I don't listen to podcasts because for me, that is my processing time where I think about all of the
Mm,
things that I've heard or read during the week and how do I start to put it together and how does it apply to the work that I'm doing? How does it apply to how I think about the future? Where do I think it's going to go from there, et cetera? And so I try to be really religious about that, taking that exercise time in the weekend to not listen or fill my head with any incremental information, but I do try during the week to find as many opportunities to integrate into one, the work that I'm delivering today, but also where are the other opportunities that I can squeeze in to listen, read, observe, etc.
yeah. I like you saying because when I go to the gym, sometimes I like to again listen to podcasts on some exercising, but again it depends on your mood because sometimes, like you said, you just want a bit of relaxation and just a bit of focus because sometimes it's good just to clear your head and then when that happens, sometimes you can just get some thoughts or something. How can you sort of up your game? Just things appear. So I think it's a good balance of mixing um, sort of your information that you're learning and also just having some downtime yourself because you do need to process things that are happening in life.
Exactly.
So then, have you ever faced a major setback? And then I guess how did you learn from it?
Yeah, I think I remember there was one time at Microsoft, they were doing a reduction in force. And essentially, I had gone to a team where we were trying to figure out how we were going to do our first opportunity to deliver services in the cloud. So we were just moving from on prem to the cloud. They pulled together a small team that was focused on the business productivity office suite and how we were going to deliver services on both sort of that technical account manager as well as consulting services into customers. I was on that team for about 9 months, and then they did a reduction of force and got rid of that team. And I was told I had about 2 weeks to find a new role. And I think for me, that was the first time in my career where I didn't make the choice to leave a role, right, and find the new opportunity before that happened. And so it was really, I think, a challenge to figure out how do I actually leverage this network of and community that I built out. This was sort of pre Women in Data Days, so it was really the community that I had built up working at Microsoft already for 10 years. Like, how was I going to reach out to that network? How was I going to make the connections? How was I going to figure out who had roles that were open that would be a good fit? Now, in hindsight, right, it was my first formal data analyst role. And so it's been a fabulous career from there. It's probably one of the best things. But I remember being notified that my job was going away and I had 2 weeks and just driving home, just sobbing because I had no idea what I was going to do. I had never been in that position before, where sort of switching roles was not my choice. And so I think sort of figuring out, okay, how am I going to apply my skill set of being a planner and an organizer and really sit down and start to scope out who is my network, who can give me an introduction to somebody who has roles open, what were my opportunities inside of Microsoft or outside, and really starting to figure out how do I do that networking, building of bridges, et cetera. And for me, I think I came out stronger on the other end, but it was definitely not an experience that I would want to live again.
No, I like the turnaround because obviously when things happen like that, it's obviously at that moment, your life's over.
That's exactly what it feels.
But you are obviously it's just complete. I guess it's body shutting down, is it? You're protecting yourself because it's a complete change. But then looking back now, it's actually directed you in a new career journey.
Yeah, and it's interesting now, and now at this point I could look back and think, oh my gosh, it really was probably the best thing that ever happened to me. So I think, right, I think for anybody that's going through sort of that transitionary period, I know it seems super hard. I know at times you'll get super frustrated. It just doesn't seem like there's any opportunities out there. You're not a good fit. There's too many applicants. Like there's so many things going on, but I just have faith that thing that could be right around the corner is the reason that the things you're looking at now aren't panning out, and just don't think that it's all a result of you not being the right candidate. It's just you're not the right candidate for that role, and there's something better for you around the corner.
I think whenever I go through like times where it's not going your way, I'll turn it around and put it into a game. Look, this is the universe testing me. And you just got to battle through, haven't you? Really, in my opinion. So, what career advice would you give someone starting in the industry today?
Yeah, I think if you're just starting in the industry today, take sort of that knowledge and experience that you either have via your career or your education, and really think about what are the incremental things that you can add on top of it. What are the other certifications or trainings potentially that might make you the better candidate than others. I think the other thing is you're super early in your career, so you may not have necessarily all of the job experience to determine what absolutely love to do and get up for every day. You'll have some ideas of what you think you want to do, but some of those early jobs I think you learn the most from because they're just very broad. And so they give you lots of exposure to lots of things because there may be something out there that you're not even aware of that will actually be your superpower or something that you're super passionate about. So take some of those early jobs as early opportunities to help you figure out what are some of those things that you like. Every job you'll learn something from, like what you like, what you don't like, and which helps, I think, as you think about your next role, your N+2 roles, your N+3 roles. You're always going to learn something from your current job on what are the things that you're super passionate about, what are the things that you probably could live without, and so each job opportunity then becomes an opportunity to rethink those things.
Brilliant. And then, any particular achievement you're most proud of?
Yeah, having 4 girls and not killing any of them, I think I'm super happy.
I've got four sisters, so yeah.
Yeah, right. That would probably be one of them. I just think for me, if I look back on my career, my hope is that by the time I am ready to retire, I can look back and say I've made it better or easier for the next generation coming behind me. And so I think anything that I can participate in, anything that I can, drive, deliver, any obstacles in the system that I can remove, those will be the things that I look back and say those are the things I'm the most proud of.
Love that. Impact, all about impact. Cool. Okay, Robin. Well, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. And obviously, you've had a fantastic career to date. And yeah, I wish you all the best for the future.
Well, thank you so much, Ben. Really appreciated the time and the opportunity, and thank you.